Awesome. We're here with Joe Espinola, who is a Republican candidate for the state senate, second Essex Middlesex district.
Correct.
A resident of Dracut, lived here in a while. Lived here about 16 years, but I guess let's start. It's good to tell people beyond just living here for 16 years and being the Dracut representative on the Greater Lowell Tech School Committee, you've got some deep ties here in Dracut. Talk a little bit about the family ties here in the community.
Yeah, so and it's fun. We had talked a little bit about this earlier. My uncle, the gym at the high school is named after my uncle, Paul Merrill, and he was the town moderator here for a number of years until he had passed away from cancer. But I recently have seen some pictures way back in the early 1900s of school committee meetings and city council meetings that have been conducted in my uncle's basement.
No kidding.
So that's how far back they go. They didn't have a place to meet, and they would have the early meetings in my uncle's basement. He had a long a serving area or like a breakfast bar, and people would go down there and they would spend hours upon hours solving problems for the people of Dracut. So my grandfather and my uncle, they were plumbers, and they pretty much all the old buildings in Dracut, they did all the plumbing in all the buildings. And so I have two families that are from the town of Dracut. There are O'Briens and Merrills, and that's my family. They were teachers, principals, elected officials. They born and raised in Dracut. My dad just asked my mom to move to Lowell to be near his parents because they weren't well, and so they moved there, and that's why I was brought up, and I was raised there for. I moved out of there when I was 24. I moved to Tingsboro, and then I moved back to Lowell when I became a police officer at 27, and I was 35 when I got married. Then I moved back to Dracut shortly after we got married.
Excellent. So, as I mentioned, you're presently the chairman of the Greater Lowell Tech School Committee.
Correct.
You've opted not to seek re-election to that position this fall to run for state senate. What prompted you to make that decision that this was the right time to run for a state legislator position?
Well, it was one of those things that early on when the person who holds the seat now was running, it was an open seat left by Barry Feingold, and I had contemplated that at that time, and it was around the same time where I was making a decision whether I should run for the Greater Lowell School Committee or I should run for state senate. And at the time, I'm a graduate of Greater Lowell School Committee, Greater Lowell School, the tech school.
Right.
I graduated in 1983, and there was some things that were going on politically, in the newspapers, that just didn't jive with me, and I figured that they needed somebody who came from that school so that they could add a new perspective to what the school means from the inside out rather than the outside in. They had a pretentious superintendent hire that went a number of rounds, over 200 rounds before they decided that they had to put it back out. I believe 212 rounds.
Wow.
And they put it back out to bid, and they got another superintendent. I don't know how many rounds over the same, but it was always a fiction of the newspaper that the stories that were going on about the school that I loved was me. So I chose to run for the school committee instead of state senate. And so it was something that I was interested in early on. And as you know, in politics, when somebody's been in a spot for a while, they tend to garner some support and some likeliness from the district, and
it's entrenched.
Yes, it's tough to beat an incumbent.
Sure.
Let's be honest. So I decided that when Barbara was leaving to seek a seat in Congress, then I said, you know what? Here's a time where I can use my experience with education, my experience with just growing up. I grew up in a neighborhood in Back Central in Lowell, to try to make a difference than what is going on right now. I think people have become complacent with their politicians, and now's a time where people are now starting to say, you promised me these things when you got elected,
Right.
and you're not doing what you said you were going to do.
Right.
And I think that it's time for a change. I think it's time for a rethink of the district and the way that they think of things, the politicians in the state of Massachusetts. And we need to even up the score. And I'm not typically, I mean, I just registered as a Republican a few years ago. I've always been unenrolled.
I see.
But to me, it seems that there are two, it's a Democratic state. Let's face it, it's a Democratic state. And it's hard to have a balance of what people believe in. Because although people that get out and vote democratically, doesn't mean that it's a Democratic state. I believe, and I call them couch voters, that they've just given up, that they don't vote. And I think what we need to do, when you have 30% of the people who are registered to vote that are coming out to vote, there's 70% of the people, this is on average, it's not,
Right. Oh, no.
you know what I'm saying. 70% of the people who are registered to vote don't come out and vote.
Right.
Why?
Right.
And I think if you give them a reason to vote, they'll get up and vote.
Right.
So that's what I'm hoping for.
You are a retired Lowell police officer. So you worked in Lowell a number of years. You lived in Lowell a number of years. Lowell, not unlike Lawrence, is part of this district, Second Essex, Middlesex. What do you feel like your background as a police officer would bring to your role as a state senator?
Well, particularly in this district, there are some issues that are going on right now in Lawrence, specifically, that my experience would definitely help to try to make a difference with these issues that are happening. As I said earlier, I am a product of Back Central Street, and you get out of Back Central Street two ways. You either went in a box or you moved out. Unfortunately, my brother didn't make it, and I did. So my brother passed away at 45 from addiction.
Really?
So addiction to me is a personal, it's a personal thing for me. I know people that are struggling. I have family members that are struggling right now with addiction. And I grew up in a bad environment in Back Central. It was very, very difficult. There were gang, turf wars. There were things that I consider myself lucky to have made it out of there. Wasn't always the way. When we moved there, it wasn't as bad as it was when I left. And I can say that definitely, because when I moved in there, it was an Irish turning Portuguese neighborhood that you could eat off the streets. People just took care of their stuff. But you still had the drug problems. You had the gang wars that were going on in the South Common, the North Common, and things got pretty dicey at the time. Now I spent 4.5 years at the Department of Corrections in Concord. And then after that I left and I went to the police department. Now the whole time I was at the police department, I spent in family services mostly with domestic violence, the gang unit, juvenile unit. I've run court programs for kids, the juvenile detention program. We also have programs that were first-time offenders that would allow kids that had just minimal crimes, and if they completed this program, they were able to have their record expunged from the court so that it wouldn't be on their record. So with that, with my family services stuff, which we're dealing with gang members, we're getting gang members out of gangs, dealing with many people that are in situations where I grew up one street over from the housing project. Most of my friends growing up are of minority descent of some sort.
Right.
It's one of those things that I get it. I've been there. I've done that. You have a situation where what's going on in Lawrence right now is not far away from what it was when I was growing up and when I was a police officer. So when you say that Lawrence and Lowell are similar, they're pretty much actually the same, but just Lowell is going one direction and Lawrence seems to be stuck in a rut. And I say this with all due respect to all the politicians, but the people in Lawrence have been promised a lot of things, and it's not happening. It's not happening to them. And the sanctuary city thing, I think, is a tag. You don't know if they're a sanctuary city. You can't tell if they're a sanctuary city. No one will admit they're a sanctuary city until they're talking to the specific parties. If the people who run the city are talking to an anti-sanctuary city group, they're anti-sanctuary city. If they're talking to a sanctuary group, they're a sanctuary city.
Right.
So what is it, a sanctuary city? Now, it seems that the Democratic Party has held on to this fallacy that it's a safer city when you're a sanctuary city. Well, trust me when I tell you this. People they're not saying anything about their neighbor, not because they don't want to be deported. They don't want to die. They don't want to get killed. They don't want trouble. They want to just survive. They don't want to get involved. And it's not because they get deported. I was a police officer for a long time, and the amount of times that I've asked someone if they were illegal alien or they were an illegal immigrant is none. We don't ask. It's not really our business. The goals of a police department are to rid the neighborhoods of the ills.
Right.
So how do we do that? We process them into the court. You arrest them. You write a warrant. You search warrants. You do raids. You do this, and you get those people into the court to take them out of the environment. Putting them back into the environment doesn't make it a safer community. It makes it the same bad community. If you take these people out of the community, it makes it safer. And I'll give you an example. When I was first into the department, maybe 3 or 4 years after I started, they started the bike patrol.
Oh, sure.
And I was one of the first guys on the bike. And the chief said to us, North Common and Lowell, it's ridden with drugs, gang members, they're dealing drugs out of the basketball court. Go do something about it. So we get on our bikes, and we went there, and that was in the summertime. By the end of the summer, we had eradicated all the ills out of the North Common. And at the end of the summer, there were elderly ladies at 11 o'clock at night sitting in the outfield of the softball games watching softball.
Nice.
It was probably one of my proudest moments as a police officer that these ladies that lived it's right in the middle of the projects in Lowell, right off of Fletcher Street,
Right.
that these elderly people could go out and enjoy watching the game now because we had rid the park of all the ills. If people are here and they don't have a legal status to be here, I can't remember a time in my adult life that the people in this country haven't been promised a path to citizenship,
Right.
that have been here for a certain amount of time.
Right.
Instead of making sanctuary cities, why don't we help the good people? If you're here as a guest and you commit a horrible crime,
Right.
or you're dealing drugs, or you're providing stuff that could kill people,
Right.
then you don't really appreciate being here.
Right.
So to me, it's not about being a legal immigrant or being having an alien here. It's more about being a guest in a house and behaving yourself and appreciating what you do. So it's not sanctuary city. It should be a path to citizenship for people who are bound and love this country or love their
Or
neighborhoods.
contributing to society.
Yes, so it's got nothing. Sanctuary people that are anti-sanctuary city have nothing to do with anti-immigrants, because my grandparents are immigrants from Ireland and Portugal.
Sure.
So it's not anything to do with that. It's
Right.
about making them a fabric, a part of the fabric of society.
Right.
If you're dealing drugs and you're killing people and you're part of a gang and you're a menace, you wouldn't leave those people in your own personal house. Why do we take them and put them back in there, into the neighborhood? So I think that's how you make safer communities, by making sure that you take care of the people who really don't appreciate being here.
Right.
And that's the way it is. And in Lawrence, there's a significant amount of people who are here without documents, but there's a large portion of them that aren't behaving themselves.
Sure. Sure.
And that's how I feel about that. But
Sure.
and where I come from, it's the same makeup of Lawrence, and I have a pulse on what goes on there. I have been walking around Lawrence now for 6 years. I worked in Lawrence for 2 years.
Oh, you did?
For the Department of Planning and Development.
Yeah.
And I also worked in Lawrence as a contractor for the Department of Planning and Development. So I know all the neighborhoods. I know all the people. I have got to meet a lot of people. So when I'm saying the things that I'm saying right now, not only is it from my experience, but it's from the people that I'm talking to when I'm walking through the neighborhoods. They have a connection to me. I go up where they are right now. I understand what they're saying, and they're afraid because they don't want the city never does anything. I go to the shelters. I go to the food banks. I go to the places that offer services. I go to the Buckley terminal where the homeless people are getting fed, but they don't want to go to the shelters because there's problems there. They all tell me the same thing. Nobody in Lawrence will admit that there's a problem.
What do, because in past elections in this district, Republican candidates tend to traditionally do very well in Andover, in Tewksbury, and Drake. Democratic candidate tends to do very well in Lawrence, and it always comes down to, okay, was the margin in Drake and Andover and Tewksbury enough to overcome the margin in Lawrence? What message are you giving when you talk to people in Lawrence? Because that really seems to be the nut that has to be cracked for a Republican candidate in this district. What message are you giving of how you can serve that city on Beacon Hill?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this in two parts, because I've also done a few interviews on the Spanish radio stations.
Ah, very good.
So the first part of that is I understand where they're coming from, and I know the things that they're concerned with.
Yeah.
And what I say to them is that, how many times in the past have you voted for Democrat that was running in an office? Oh, I mostly vote Democrat. What have they done for you? How have they changed your life? Has Lawrence changed? Has anything gotten better? In fact, it's probably gotten worse. And I say to them, just try it. Give it a chance. Try a little bit of change. In 2 years, you can change it back if I don't do something that you like. If I'm not making a change, or I'm not here for you to look and to try to help build a better community, bring the jobs to the community, give the schools back to the people in the city. The people in the city aren't running the schools. The state is running the schools right now. And I'll tell you, as a school committee person, you lose contact with the people. You're just running a business, and you don't have any personal interest or involvement with what goes on in the schools. You know what I mean? So the state's reason for hiring this last superintendent, with no input from a community, no input from the school committee, no input from anybody else but the state. The reason why they said it was okay is because that lady was fluent in Spanish. That to me is not the reason. Now, the second part of it is, I get asked this question all the time. When you go to the state, when you win, you're a Republican.
Yeah.
You're outweighed
Now that was the question I was going to ask.
by the Democrats.
How can you be effective
No.
as a small minority on Beacon Hill?
So I know what Lawrence and the other districts, Tewksbury, Andover, and Drake, have been promised.
Yeah.
So when I go to the State House and I ask for something, and I'll say to them, I'm only asking for something you've already promised them. So how do you say now no, but before it was yes? And the same with Lawrence. And I usually get a good kick out of that from radio stations. I've actually had someone call up to one of the radio stations and ask me that question that I just answered. And I said, I will put it right back on the people who used to be here or who have promised that they would do X, Y, and Z for the community. And I'm going to say, it's the same thing you promised them. It's time to fulfill your promises.
Sure. I'm sure that you have been spending a lot of time also walking around, getting to know people in Andover and Tewksbury, also some of the other communities in the district. When you knock on doors, when you talk to people at supermarkets, what are you hearing in terms of what are you hearing for common themes in some of these towns of what their big concerns are? What are people worried about? What are they looking for from their state government?
Well, most of the people that the most common thread is, are you running as a Republican or a Democrat? That's what they want to know. And when I tell them I'm running as a Republican, it sometimes creates an excitement in their voice because it's a change. They know it's a change.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've always been unenrolled. This is the only time for the last 3 years I've been a Republican.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk to the people in Lawrence, people are going to be surprised with the amount of people who have left the Democratic Party and have either become unenrolled or now have a Republican, and they have a movement of Republicans going on in Lawrence right now that are of Hispanic descent.
Right.
I know there's a bunch of Republicans in Lawrence, but people are going to be surprised because I am being introduced to all the people who want to make a change, who have a stake in the community, who are volunteers, who do in church groups and pantries and cleaning up the neighborhoods and cleaning up the parks, right? These people are moving. And the people that aren't moving and are connected, they're concerned with, where is everybody? Why aren't they helping? So that's one of the biggest themes. It's not really a Republican, Democrat type of a thing. It's like, are you going to do what you say you're going to do?
Right.
And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for change, not a party change, just a person change to say that they're going to do that.
Sure.
And the second thing, everybody has common things that they want, taxes and community things that go on, crime, gangs. Crime is a common theme. Crime is a common theme
Sure.
in all the communities, right? But in particular with all the communities, Drake it has economic development. That's a side thing. If you want to talk about the different things
Right.
for each district.
Right.
Drake has economics. Tewksbury has economics.
Yeah.
The 93 corridor. How do we straighten that out? And they also have a problem with 40B projects
Sure.
that are going. They are like 0.4% under
Right.
the
Very
percent
close.
right now,
Right.
and they're getting a 70-something development,
Yeah.
77 unit development that's going to put them way over, and it's in a place where a lot of people aren't happy.
Right.
You go to Andover, concerns right now with the school systems, the school committee, the superintendent, the coaches situation with every time they're trying to fire coaches from
Right.
one reason or another.
Right.
And the biggest thing in Andover, though, is the condition of their schools. It's going to be a serious issue in the next few years that Andover has a number of schools that need to be redone or replaced. So that's one of their parallels in each other. And it's the use of taxpayer money, how it gets filtered out. Now the state just had a $1.8 million surplus. I don't know one of my communities, except Lawrence gets funded by the state.
Right.
But the other three communities could use some serious amount of money
Right.
in their community for schools.
Right.
And the school formula, the funding formula, and since I've been running, for Greater Lowell. I've had conversations with all of my friends who are representatives or state senators about the funding formula, and the state funding formula is flawed.
Right.
And no one would listen to me because they thought it was gonna skew, and people in the communities would say, well, we're getting X, we ought to be happy with X.
Right.
No, it should be out equally.
Right.
Somehow try to distribute it equally, because if Drake every year is close to going for a Proposition 2.5 override, they're obviously not doing well, and they need some more money. And where do we get that money from? And you can't just keep raising taxes,
Right.
and spending money on things that people aren't really happy about. And you have to make a change somewhere. I know the system in my 3 districts have a problem with Lawrence, only with the fact that they don't mind helping. The fraud and abuse they
Sure.
don't like, and that's the common theme with my 3 towns with Lawrence, is that they don't have the fraud and abuse. They would like it to stop.
Right.
So I'm a retired police officer. Every year I have to go to the retirement board and I have to prove that I'm alive. And then they have to sign it. I have to sign a paper, and it gets notarized.
Right.
And they say I have to show an ID that says that I'm who I am. You don't have to do that for the state.
Right.
When you're collecting benefits.
Right.
You don't have to know yet. If my dad passed away, they canceled all his credit cards. They knew he was dead. I didn't call anybody. They called me up and they said, "We're really sorry about your dad. Canceled all his credit cards for you. Don't worry about it," right? And off they go. And the state, you're telling me the state of Massachusetts can't do the same thing?
Sure.
And when I looked into it, I know a friend that's on the fraud and abuse team
Right.
that investigates. They don't have enough people. They got 12 or 14 people that are investigating it. Now, is it because they can't afford it, or is it because they don't want to find it? You know what I'm saying? So there needs to be some more oversight so if we have X amount of people that are receiving the funds, let's let the other people in the state of Massachusetts feel good about helping their neighbors, not feeling like they're being taken under the rug.
Excellent. Last question, and it's a question I've been asking all the candidates. What do you want people to know about you as a person? What if they don't know you personally? What do they need to know about who Joe Espinola is and what you're about?
And that's an interesting question, because I have a bunch of reasons. But the reason I always say, when people say to me, "Why are you doing this? Why are you running? You're crazy." I'm retired. I have a family. I coach in the communities. I have plenty of things to do. And I say to them, the reason why I'm running for this job is the reasons why you're asking me why I'm doing this. Because of those same reasons, I believe that I can make a change. I believe that I can make people feel comfortable about filling in the box next to my name. And I believe that that people should be comfortable with their politicians. And I know that I could do that. I am like I said, I grew up son of a firefighter. My grandfather was a paper hanger. He was in the union. My father was in the union. I was in the union. I ran unions. I was on board of directors for unions, a number of unions all the time. And what people need to realize is that because I have an R after my name, that doesn't change who I am, what I think of, and I don't toe the party line. I'm me, and I think that the people in the district, especially this district, they are getting more towards voting for the person, not the party, and it's going on. So what people should know about me is I'm active in my communities. I have been crawling on the banks of Lawrence, pulling people off of there in the sub-zero temperatures, bringing them to shelters. When I worked in Lawrence, I've gone around in food pantries. I've helped in different types of things. When I first became a police officer, my first job was working in Lawrence when they had the riots on Haverhill Street. So I know every nook and cranny. And then later on, when I became on the SWAT team, I was at the fire at the Malden Mills. And I was there for 2.5 weeks, helping people, carrying people downstairs, doing things like that. I'm a coach. I'm very, very involved in my community. I'm in a number of different benefit groups and nonprofits. Matter of fact, after I leave here today, I'm going down to the Merrimack Valley Food Bank.
Oh, yeah.
So I participate in all those things. I'm a community person. I know I can make a difference. I know about schools. I know about unions. I know about education funding. I know what the people need in Lawrence to make themselves to a better level, not a handout, a hand up. And with the opiate crisis, in my district, there are 4 vocational schools. There's one in each one of my communities.
Right.
Now, when I talk about the opiate crisis, I say the state, by using Narcan, they're throwing a net at these guys and girls after they've jumped out the window. The net doesn't do any good once they're flying out the window. You got to give them the net before. So I've developed this policy of mind, soul, and body. There's a reason why they're using drugs. We need to work on that. Health services. We need to give them health services. Body is the eradication of the drugs from their body, the sobering them up. And the soul is to give them a way and a reason why to wake up every morning and not go back to where you were.
Right.
And through that, I believe that we can train people to be apprentices and to give them a reason and a job through the vocational schools. They sit there a significant amount of the day that they can go and they can learn a trade to give them a job, a good paying job, and be able to pick themselves up. So not a handout, a hand up. Let's help these people, show them that there is another way to do it. And I believe the same with the veterans. 22 veterans a day, every day in this country kill themselves. We can take GI Bill benefits and turn them into a benefit for the school system and for the veteran by teaching them a trade. So there's so many aspects and so many opportunities and so many things that just go unused in this district that I think just people get inside the box and I don't know if they're afraid of change or they don't want change, but what I say to all the people in my district is the Democratic Party has held Lawrence hostage for a number of years because they tell them that if you vote for a Republican, they're going to take all your benefits away. And that's not the case.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to learn more about your campaign, learn more about you, where can they go?
They can call me at 978-337-8427. They can go to my website, joeespinolaforsenate.com. They can also go to my Facebook page at Joe Espinola for Senate, right? That Facebook page. I haven't been on it in a while. He runs all that stuff, so.
Excellent. We appreciate it again, and good luck this fall.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate it.